Altered Beast, one of the most well-known games of Sega's 16-bit era, and the very title that functioned as both the Sega Mega Drive and Sega Genesis's first packing game in the West. Due to its flashy transformation animations, this isn't a title anyone is ever forgetting quickly, and despite its average gameplay quality, it continues to make it into modern 16-bit Sega compilations to this day. While this one was made way back in 1988, what if I were to tell you that there is not only a much newer Altered Beast than this, but a game that would try and reinvent the franchise to feature 3D polygonal graphics? So with that said, hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. Let's take a trip back through time to look at the hot mess that was Altered Beast's forgotten sequel. Yeah! The story of Altered Beast 2 starts with a man we have discussed before on this channel, Makoto Uchida, the creator of not just the original Altered Beast, but also Golden Axe 2. The man's impact on the gaming industry is undeniable. While these two video games are perhaps his most famous work, Uchida would continue to build on his legacy, including creating Golden Axe The Revenge of Death Adder, the amazing 4-player arcade exclusive sequel to his legendary game. In 1996, Uchida would also serve as the director behind the 3D arcade beat-em-up that would later be ported to the Sega Saturn, known as Dynamite Deka, a game that would see release in the West as Die Hard Arcade. In my opinion, the world's first excellent 3D brawler, which is not surprising when we learn that it was created by the genius behind Golden Axe years earlier. Moving through time, Uchida continued to keep his previous success with Altered Beast remaining within the back of his mind. Uchida notes that when Sega themselves first considered reviving the Altered Beast license, he began to consider whether he wanted to take charge of the project and work with a team to proceed with development. During this time, Makoto states that he realised that it would take a huge amount of time and a lot of development staff to complete a 3D modern Altered Beast game. And moving into the new millennium and an era where the PlayStation 2 was now the most dominant game console, an opportunity would come up to make a new Altered Beast game a reality. Basically, Uchida identified that there was a chance to create a development house in China, a region where staffing was cheaper than in the US or Japan, where a bigger team could be easily afforded. Uchida told higher-ups at Sega that if they asked him to go to China, he would go. So both Uchida and Shinichiro Okamoto, one of the directors of the next Altered Beast game, would head to the region in 2002. Here they would help launch Sega Shanghai and continued their work on the new Altered Beast project. Uchida reports the collaboration between the Japanese and Chinese staff was tough, and there was a lot of hardships involved throughout the development process. Despite these challenges, on January 27, 2005, after a long development cycle, a new Altered Beast for the PlayStation 2 would finally hit shelves in Japan. The game, titled Juki Project Altered Beast in the country, would function as a 3D action-adventure beat-em-up hack-and-slashy video game that offered a drastic paradigm shift in not only gameplay, but the title's story too. The ancient Greek aesthetics, which was a key theme previously in the original game, was completely excluded from this entry, with the entirety of this new title featuring a more modern-inspired environment. The game looks in many ways graphically typical of many releases from the PlayStation 2 era, and follows the story of a gentleman known as Luke Custer. Luke is not a regular human, as instead he is a genome cyborg. Essentially, his DNA and other genetic makeup has been artificially altered by microchips containing genetic makeup of other creatures, and this was years before Bill Gates would do this to most of humanity in real life years later. Due to this gene splicing, Luke has the ability to transform into a range of different anthropomorphic beasts, which is where the classic gimmick from the previous game comes into all of this. In this game's story, it starts with Luke surviving a helicopter crash but loses his memory in the process. Throughout the game, he sets off to learn the truth behind his past and how he has ended up the way he is. After the Japanese launch of the game would make its debut in Europe and other PAL regions, however the title would never make it to North American shores. A post from Game Informer in late 2004 reveals that Sega of America announced that they had no plans to publish or license the game in the region, with the article noting that they had heard that Sega were now being much more selective with the titles that they would bother to bring over from Japan, with the company opting to pass on Altered Beast for the new generation. Japanese and European gamers had the opportunity to play as Luke from a third-person perspective as they battled through hordes upon hordes of enemies in close combat, while trying to reach the end of each area. You know, standard beat-em-up stuff really, but now in a 3D environment. Like the original game, as mentioned, the playable character can transform into a range of different beasts, each with their own set of abilities and advantages in combat. Those who have played the arcade original will be able to recall that the original game's transformation animations were among the game's most striking features. This element is once again surprisingly pulled off very well in this newer Altered Beast game, with the pre-rendered cutscenes showing off the transformations taking place, with them all being stunningly well animated and offering great visual appeal once more. So the team can certainly be credited for at least managing to get this part of the game very right. In regards to Uchida himself describing this game and its transformations, he mentions that they prepared a lot of the beastmen in the game so that they could be used anywhere, allowing players the ability to transform into various beasts depending on the situation. He is proud that not only did each of these transformation results look different, but each one has their own unique actions, so even in the same place the way players play depends on which transformation they choose. He mentions that this was an effective way of giving players different ways in which they could play the game. Provided enough energy has been collected and different transformation abilities have been acquired through collecting the right items, unlike in the original incarnation of Altered Beast, players can now transform into any beast form at will. In the early stages, Luke can only transform into a werewolf, but more skills are unlocked as gamers make their way through the game. The items required to gain new powers are genome cyborg DNA chips, allowing Luke to become a Garuda, a Wendigo, a Minotaur, a dragon, and even a merman. As stated, each transformation of course comes with its own unique set of abilities, allowing players to overcome obstacles, puzzles, bosses, or whatever else stands in their way. In fact, after beating the game, additional transformation and gameplay modes can be unlocked, including a sort of boss rush feature. As for the transformations in the post-game, this includes a were-tiger transformation, a grizzly bear, and an alien-like creature. When it comes to the game's violent and somewhat slightly graphic nature, Uchida notes that he does cherish the atmosphere that the game brings to the table throughout, and that he felt that the direction of violence in the game could not be removed without taking away the title's flavour. In fact, he notes that the marketing department at Sega of America strongly advised him to try and make the game as violent looking as possible, which is not much of a shock really, considering that this was the gaming era that many marketeers were encouraging developers to make their titles as Grand Theft Auto 3 like as possible. I mean, just look at Final Fight Streetwise, the game is completely out of line from the rest of the franchise. Speaking of including violent elements, Uchida notes that he feels it is important in his work anyway. His previous work on Die Hard Arcade resulted in an exhilarating affair. Uchida said he is of the mentality that anything in a game is fine as long as it is refreshing. When making Altered Beast 2015, it was about trying to create a synergistic effect between violence and exhilaration, which obviously did not go to plan quite as well as he would have hoped for. Despite Uchida's best efforts working with his China-based team and some cool features here and there, sadly this Altered Beast game never ended up being the experience that fans were truly looking for. Journalists at the game's time of release would end up giving the title a tough time as well, so let's have a look at what the critics had to say. CNET would heavily criticise the shallow, repetitive gameplay that they felt the game offered, but would also comment on the game's aesthetics too, including warning readers about the game's violent nature, stating, "A word of warning, Altered Beast is quite a gory game, particularly with the beast transformation cutscenes, which show graphic images of tendons bursting, jaws being ripped apart, eyeballs exploding, and more. It's nothing the Mortal Kombat series hasn't shown before, but very young kiddies may need to be in the other room when you're playing it." In spite of the gore levels, over in Europe the game would only receive a 12 certification. Eurogamer would choose to give this game a 2 out of 5 stars, with the journalist Ellie Gibson starting her piece off by stating that the original Altered Beast from 1988 It's just plain old and was not worth resurrecting to begin with. Let me know what you think of that. She states that Alter Beast pushes over the borders of average but playable and into the realm of too irritating to bother with. There's the rubbish cameras which follow you about with all the speed and intelligence of, well, one of your enemies. The article in summary states, in short, we can't recommend Alter Beast to anyone. Had it arrived a few years earlier, it might have been worth a look, but now, like the original, it just feels dated. And since the shops of 2005 are full of shiny new handhelds and games that outclass this one by a mile, there are better things to spend your money on. PocketLint.com introduces their write-up by bringing to the conversation that a newly released remake of Alter Beast, originally a cult classic almost 17 years ago, seems to follow the same suit of many ill-fated films. They would conclude, like myself earlier, by complimenting the transformation cutscenes which they refer to as spectacularly detailed and realistic. However, they would criticise much else of what was on offer. They close off by stating overall the game is disappointing, especially after the success of the original. For those new to the series, don't bother buying it. Fans of the original would only buy this to complete a set. So, as you have probably garnered from everything I've laid out today, the Alter Beast sequel for the Sony PlayStation 2 offered nothing close to the memorable experience of the 1988 original. But what are Uchida's final words with regards to the positive side of this game? He states, I always wanted to show something that everyone is happy with and surprise that. I wanted to show you something unusual. Whether you've played the previous work, Alter Beast, or you're new to Alter Beast, Project Alter Beast, there are lots of interesting things to play, so please look. Holding these thoughts in mind, this was my coverage of the history of the game. But according to Makoto Uchida himself, the legend behind Golden Axe, Alter Beast and Die Hard Arcade, he wants you to try this game out for yourself, so you can make up your own mind on the matter. So, if you're one of a few people who have given this game a go yourself in the past, then why not let us know in the comment section down below exactly what you thought of this mostly forgotten game. Anyway, if you enjoyed this one, you might like my upload on the good transformation-based beat-em-up Metamorphic Force. Subscribe and check it out now. Yeah, cheerio.